My name is Erik Hallstenson. I work as a PhD student in a cross-disciplinary research project called Engaging Vulnerability at Uppsala University, and I'm a PhD student in philosophy. I think we need to ask ourselves whether things are really slowing down, as we have heard many times. I would rather say that we experience time most often as rhythmic, in the simple sense that time is expectations of something to come from what has happened before. However, this spring, with the whole situation of the pandemic, has led to a number of different rhythms being introduced into the lives of very many people, if not all of us. And I'm thinking specifically about a set of what we might call statistical rhythms, expectancies of how the pandemic will play out, the course of the pandemic, in which very many people are trying to figure out what will happen based on projected vulnerabilities of an entire population, and that is the projected vulnerabilities of all of us. And another example of these statistical rhythms that we are all introduced to in this situation is the idea of excess mortality, that there is somehow a deviation, an increase of mortality due to this pandemic, which is also an expectancy of vulnerability in a population, but which includes an idea of normalcy, that there is a normal vulnerability to this population of people in this post-industrial welfare society that we will someday maybe return to. And these statistical rhythms which are very much dictated by ideas about vulnerability, stands in very sharp contrast to other rhythms in our lives. Something like, for example, the diurnal shifts, in which we live our lives according to whether it's dark or light outside, to measured time, which we measure with clocks, the 24-hour period, the week, the weekend, the month, the year, and so on. But also the idea that we expect to live a long life, which is also an expectation and a rhythm that is interrupted and disrupted by the pandemic. So I would really like to address these three, sort of the interactions between these rhythms in time. And when it comes to something like our daily rhythms, the diurnal shifts, we expect, or at least we live with the expectation that we will rise up in the morning, we will go to work, and in many countries going to school has also completely stopped for long periods of time, not in Sweden, but in very many other countries. And this is due to the vulnerability of us all to this virus that is the cause of the pandemic, of course. But we are also experiencing disruptions in our expectations of a year. Yearly celebrations are cancelled or changed fundamentally, and these disruptions are all open-ended in time. We don't know when these disruptions will end, because we cannot accurately predict when the pandemic will end. So, and the most important of these disrupted rhythms, I think, is what I call the idea of a long life, or of longevity. This not as a statistical vulnerability of an entire population, but as a vulnerability of ourselves and the people close to us and so on. So there is a drastic, I think, difference between these statistical rhythms dictated by the vulnerability of a population and the disruptions in the rhythms of life dictated by the vulnerability of ourselves and our close, the people we hold close to us. A positive development in the statistical vulnerability sense is something like a lower number of deaths projected over a number of days, projected over a rhythm of a pandemic that looks on a diagram a bit like a wave, while the vulnerability of me is simply the fact that I can fall seriously ill. Whether I am on a falling part of the scale in the statistical rhythm of this is of no importance to the disruptions in my life and in my fragile expectations of my future that will happen if I fall ill. So how these things are coupled together will be crucial for what people will think about our societies and our lives in the future. It will be crucial how these things will be coupled together by political rhetoric, but also by different kinds of media, in trying to ascertain what should be done in the future and what kind of responsibility and accountability we can expect from the societies that we live in, from the common measures we all have taken to reduce the effects of this pandemic. I don't think we should really talk about slowdowns, but about disruptions and about different rhythms superimposing themselves upon each other. But I think it's also important to remember that for very many people, if not most, this is also just simply frightening times that should end as soon as possible. And because, not everyone can work from home, not everyone can quarantine effectively, and that is especially the case in other parts of the world, of course, where living conditions are what they are and so on. So, there might be new ways of relating to the rhythms of life coming out of this, but on the other hand, there is an enormous desire for the return to normalcy that I think is completely understandable and also a very strong force in our lives.